So we are really happy to have Kate, Kate Thomas, as our presenter today. A lot of you know Kate already, so she doesn't need a lot of introduction. Kate is currently working as a content architect as Bupa at Bupa. We're really lucky to be working with Kate on a project, but we've been getting to know her this year. Kate moved back to Australia from quite a long time working overseas. So she has about 25 years of experience in total. And she's worked in Australia, but also extensively in the UK and the US. Her special skill is untangling complex content challenges for large enterprises, and guiding the development of structured and sustainable digital platforms. And that's kind of what she's going to be talking about today. So most recently, she worked at a global level as a content architect at PayPal. And she is going to be talking today about how she brought content architecture and content operations together to power PayPal's publishing paradigm shift, probably the most alliterative title we've ever had. So that I'll leave it there, and looking forward to hearing from Kate. If you do have questions and comments as we go, feel free to pop them into the chat, and then we'll come back to them at the end. Or Kate, if you want to pause at any time to take questions, feel free to do that too. So I'll leave that up to you. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Thank you, Angus. So I'll take it on from here.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So you can all see my screen.
We can.
And you can see the deck.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Let's hope this works. Thank you very much for that. There we go. I'm going to start with my acknowledgement of country. I'm recognising knowledge the Wadawurrung people, traditional owners of the land, sea and skies where I work, which is Ocean Grove down past Geelong. Angus has covered this for me. I left Australia in 2006 with my partner for a couple of years in London and got back in May. So I left the work I'd done in Australia. The last job I had was at the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet in Canberra, redesigning the Prime Minister's website and the website of the department. And I'm sort of pleased to say that the IA we introduced then in 2004 is still in place. And, you know, a million prime ministers later, they pretty much, IA persists longer than politicians. The UK, lots of educational institutions, and I ended up working at a global agencies, digital agencies. And it was really interesting because my grounding was in public sector, universities. Standards and systems and scale were really in my career DNA. And I got to the agencies where they were used to doing far more commercial, sort of cut and run type builds. And they honestly thought I had some secret sauce. And I was going, no, it's just called governance. It's, you know, it's not such a big deal. So that was successful. We had a lot of success there. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is the work I was doing at PayPal. I ended up working for them in the States and then went back to the UK, where we, on the marketing content on the .com site globally, we managed to cut publishing time from 6 weeks to a couple of days. So before I get into the detail of what I did, just to set some context about PayPal, over 400 million active accounts. Most of those are people like you and I with consumer accounts, in 202 markets in about 40 languages, all 7 PMs, and about 28,000 employees. And I've just done the approximate breakdown, back of the envelope breakdown that I did at various points when I was working there. A lot of engineers, followed secondly by the customer support team, then getting into our world of experience design. About 150 UX designers while I was there. We were growing at pace. The work that I will describe for you sort of supported with sort of recruitment. So we had loads of people kind of hired towards the end. And one content modeler, I was doing that job for most of the time that I'm going to talk you through, and then managed to get a job spec to hire someone. So then I could just be the architect and the modeler could do that. So some publishing context so you understand the problem we were solving. Being a tech company, PayPal always had engineers looking after all the content everywhere. Everything. The tech docs in code makes kind of sense, bit of sense with specialist tech doc software. Product content, all in code. Marketing content, all in code. Legal content, all in code. All the content, all in code. This was managed by front-end engineers. Makes sense, all the engineers. Which meant it took sort of 3 sprints to get a marketing content update done on the site. So there were incredibly long, complex, convoluted timelines to get content updated. I worked closely, before I did this work on the marketing content on .com, I'd worked with the legal content to structure the user agreement that all 426 million PayPal customers had signed. I'm not sure they'd read them. I read that word for word, and I can tell you, you don't have to. You're good. Just continue to tick OK. But the legal content, for example, being a regulated industry, we had a very strict, clear publishing flow. But I mean, it honestly took ages, like months and months and months to get sort of things planned out. And when things changed, I always get that would still take at least weeks, if not days. Localization was all offline. It was just like, do your best. So every market had their own sort of local localization agency in country. They would take sort of guidelines from branding. Sort of the way PayPal is set up, it's always US first, always sort of this idea of this is what we're going to do, this is our latest position. That will get filtered down for the local markets. They will translate it and publish it, ask their local friendly team of front-end engineers to whack it up on the site. So, which leads to my last point there, there's no governance. Didn't really know what we had, didn't know when it should come down, if it was current or accurate. And anytime, as happens, there was a breach of some sort, that from a compliance or regulatory perspective, it would take a team of engineers sort of weeks to interrogate Git databases to find the content as it was when that user saw it, which is hugely expensive and hugely inefficient. So this is a problem we're solving because PayPal wanted, and another bit of context, the start of 2021, January 2021, pre-pandemic, it was like we had this magical all hands meeting where our goal for the year was to reach 1 billion users. And just in support of that, some external consultants were hired to look at our end-to-end processes. And they reported in sort of mid-2020 and with a whole swathe of recommendations. And they did a, root and branch analysis. The 3 big ones that I'm going to talk to you about today, move content from bespoke, handcrafted React templates to a headless CMS, so you can use shared structured content, have stronger governance to support that exercise, and use a taxonomy so you start to have a controlled vocabulary. So there's alignment and agreement about what it is that you do and what we call things. I was working in another part of PayPal at this point. As I mentioned, I'd done the legal content modeling for their user agreement. Then I was sort of doing bits and pieces at a loose end. And I was brought over to the .com team to work on this. So as a result, from 2021, we have content in a headless CMS, marketing content and campaign content, the 404 page, accessibility page, the About Us page, pricing content, all of this is in the CMS, all shared, all structured for reuse. Programmatic localization, and you'll just have to, I'm not sure if you can hear that in the background. There's some background noise. I apologize.
It's not too bad at all, Kate. Don't worry about it.
All right, perfect. Programmatic localization. So we connected we have a massive in-house localization team who connected through an API their translation engine to the CMS. We supported that with, I've said programmatic localization there, supported with a whole other new workflow around our product managers would take the US English source. We would publish that, get that make that available in the CMS. They would align with their local partners globally, French legal, German legal, Australian legal, make any updates needed to the English content, which would come through my team, authoring team, and then that would go into their translation engine. And this saved endless workarounds, and we had one source of content and for our localized content, we always knew exactly whatever was on the CMS was what was in the translation database, which is perfect. And where our 6-week time frame for publishing content, we could cut that to 2 days because we had shared components, shared content, none of the complexity around publishing that had been in the bowels of engineering code. So that, and also supported, as localization was, with much stronger upstream workflows, which ends again to the last point, end-to-end governance. One of the last things I did was document. I'd done a massive documentation in various forms, but put it into our standard operating procedures, which are guiding all behaviour about how the system worked, when, why, who, what should be updated. So this was an absolutely groundbreaking change to how content happens at PayPal. This was attempt number 9 by PayPal to introduce a CMS for marketing content. They had failed on the 8 previous attempts because that was engineering, either building an in-house tool that was not fit for purpose, or just taking something off the shelf and shoving it and not working, and just missing the entire experience piece, missing the authoring piece, missing the governance piece, missing all the workflow pieces around it. So, I mean, the 8th attempt was kind of successful in the sense that a few people were using it, but 90% of users on the site, 90% of pages on the site were still being built by a CMS, by engineers. And this is due to 2 factors, which I will talk to you today: content architecture and content operations. And before I go any further, I've just put this in here to define what these 2 things are. So content architecture defines how content is structured, stored, processed, and managed in back-end systems. And I love that little diagram at the bottom. It's just the perfect jigsaw piece between content strategy, what you want. I mean, content strategy is always aspirational, right? This is what we want. This is what we recommend. Here's the tools, how we're doing it. Here's how we're going to publish it in the content management system, which is authoring, review, archiving, all of that. So it's setting the content up for success. And content ops, a management activity that deploys, operates, monitors, and evaluates the operations across the content lifecycle, including the tools, procedures, and I would also add people there to support it. So any manufacturing business, of course, will have massive kind of operations, so content needs it too. And I've just added this on the bottom. I'm not sure if you're all aware of this, but just there's a free book on content ops that came out in March this year that's written by all the brilliant content ops brains. And if you don't have it, just go to that link and download it. So operations is green and architecture is orange. And this is pretty much how we did what I just described. So I mentioned that I was working in another part of PayPal, and I started working with the .com team in about October 2020. And we were given a blank slate. I worked in a small team with technical architect, product owner, head of engineering, and designer. And we worked out how we were going to do it. None of them had really worked in content systems at scale before. Because of my history that you saw on this, for one of the first slides, I've worked at scale for enterprises, private enterprises as well as public. So I could bring this knowledge and help guide conversations and make sure we were focused on the right thing. Because of this, a big part of my role at this point was education and information, sharing as much as I could. So I would write every time we got to a significant point in something we were doing, I had a running blog post a blog area that I was updating. And this just gave me a way to actually articulate for me what I was doing and make sure I could explain myself and talk through it and align it and, stress test ideas. So it was a matter of like, this is what we're doing, as well as like, this is what we have just done, and just validating it. And those blog posts were really helpful because we were moving so quickly that I knew that these fundamentals and the conceptual framework of what we were doing was going to drive all the future work that we're going to do for the next 4, 5, 6 years. So setting them in stone was really important. So in 2021, we started with a proof of concept that worked. I was doing the authoring, and a key point of this and part of the leading that I was doing was making sure things were named correctly. So I was naming things in the content management system that would inform what the components were named. And I did this not just through my own head. You'll see in a slide later the collaboration that I was doing. I worked with the content strategy team and content designers who had named all the things already. So I reflected those in the CMS and made sure that that was reflected in the component name. So that, for example, became the API identifier in the code, what it was called in the CMS. So joining those dots and making those things knit together was helpful, because I knew when we came to authoring, we would have authoring teams who knew nothing about the work we were doing now. I used the content to make sure it made sense, because I didn't want some random sort of names of component that bore no relation to anything else that was in the system. So that was all happening in that sort of first phase, and into as I was building the models and documenting the rules and guidelines. I'd hired a contract taxonomist to start building a taxonomy for the content we had. We were modeling existing content, so it was just what was on the site at the moment. And we launched sort of at the start of June 2021, about sort of 8 or 9 months after we'd started. Hugely successful, and started to plan for, and we also started doing US first, and then July and August of 2021, how many countries do? Yeah, about 30 countries, all of the small, medium business and large enterprise content for these 30 countries in their local language, taking what was on the sites now. Into 2022, there was a new design, we had a new CMS, We started picking up microsites that needed to be put in the CMS. We picked up the 404 page, the accessibility page, the About Us pages, things that were happening that we knew were shared. Some point in between 2022, towards the end, I audited the site to start to identify what else might be a candidate for the CMS. And so this was my executive, the paytup.com executive, was driving all of this, but I was also contributing because I was closest to the content. 2023, absolute single source success. We were localizing like crazy, just every, and I can probably share some of these now with you. Let me just share my screen. How do I do that? Let me see if I can get.
I think you might need to unshare and then reshare.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me share. Just got to look at yourself for a second, Angus. So if you look here, so this is how PayPal works for Brazil. If I go here, we've got PayPal works. We've got ways to pay. So this is a consumer site for the ways to pay. And Australia, same content, same image. UK, same content, same image. So we've managed to, this is just localized content for each of the markets. And we were rolling these out, honestly, it felt like every couple of weeks. Because by this point, I'd moved off from doing the modeling and architecture work, and I was managing 22 content authors who were doing the work in the CMS. So that was all 2023. Oh, stop sharing. Let me just try and get back to where we were. And from 2024, perfect. Reconfiguration. And I'll be talking a bit more about that in later on. Let me just get back here. So there was a lot going on, a million things happening, and out of the million things that were happening, I've chosen 3 just to drill down on for you all. And being Halloween, genies aren't really Halloween, are they? But I've just gone a little bit of magic. So we can have these 3 points really made the difference for me. 1, befriending engineering. 2, networking relationships. And 3, owning my expertise. So these 3 things I think were key to our success. So first, I had 2 stock phrases when we were doing this work. One was the CMS changes everything. It changes how content happens, who does it, when they do it, how it happens, the tools you need, resourcing, workflow will all change. The second thing, PayPal is just content and code. As Angus mentioned, I've recently started with Bupa. We have an actual product. We sell insurance. You know, before there were websites, there were shops. You could walk in and talk to a Bupa salesperson and buy an insurance policy. That makes sense. PayPal is sort of nothing. Its secret sauce is its code, which is useless without the content. The content needs the code. So as you saw at the top of the deck, engineering and the code is incredibly well supported by engineering and all the systems that make sure it's correct and compliant. Content needs to be as well supported. It's as important. Without the content, the code doesn't make any sense. So this was so the reason I'm saying all this, you know, if your systems, if your decisions, if your products, if your content, if it doesn't work in code, it will not work. You know, you must befriend engineering, and you must really get into those conversations with engineering. They need you as much as you need them. The barriers between the technical barriers between sort of in the work that we're doing to deliver experience have just crumbled in the time that I've been working, the 25 years that Angus mentioned. I used to work with back-end engineers to configure databases to make sure the content in the code worked well. So now it's all in software and tools, and they need you as much as you need them. For example, for the naming, to make sure that it makes sense. Technical architects are your friend. They are the ones who understand if your bit of software or kit that you want to introduce, will it actually fit in the tech stack? Everyone's got their own tech stack, and everyone loves to put new things in, but the technical architect will really say yay or nay. Educate, evangelize, and empathize. So patience is your friend here. No one had done this before at PayPal. Well, they, as I mentioned, they tried, but not in a way that made sense or was successful. So you need to just, empathy and communication is important. And name everything, because no one else is. I always say this to all the content people. I said, no one else is looking at the content. We are the only ones who are concerned with it in a real sense. And I always saw my job as going at the very start. I mentioned I took my guidance for naming things from content strategy and content design, because they've done the deep thinking about why these things are called they are. It's not my job to sort of change that because it suits whatever. I've got, we must align with they've got the user research that makes sense for those things. And brush up on your tech skills. In that period, end of 2020, I did a lot of studying of content modeling, because the work I'd done on it like a couple of years before was a bit sort of sketchy. And so I just feel like, and obviously things had changed a lot. So I just literally just brushed up and watched a few things and joined a few courses. And that really was all it took. You don't need to know everything all the time. So, that was just a reminder that attempt number 9. I nearly fell over when I heard that, but then I went, yeah, of course it was attempt number 9. So, how do we do this? How do we slash that publishing time from 6 weeks to a couple of days? Not on our own. Obviously it takes a village. And this is just to lead on from what I was saying in the last slide about collaboration, about education, collaboration, making sure you are aligned. I often think my job, you could, I flippantly say, I write things down and I capture meeting notes and I capture decisions and I turn those into blog posts and conference papers and Confluence documentation and presentations and into the models themselves to make sure things are done. So making the implicit explicit is really important, because things move really quickly and it's important to have these moments in time captured. And I had no influence. I was one person in 28,000 other staff. Like, what could I do? But I borrowed the authority of the executive. I was fortunate to have the head of the .com team, Lucy Hyde, a brilliant manager, just corralled all of us and took care of everything else. So that is really important, that you've got that backing. And also other CMS, across PayPal. I'd already worked on a couple of big content chunks across PayPal and discovered that people have similar problems. Other people were using different parts of our CMS, and we needed to align. If I hadn't left PayPal, I'd be trying to get sort of this enterprise level code relationship between all of the buckets of content that we've got. We'll get there eventually, but it will just take a bit more time. That was sort of for my own sanity, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Let me just move on. Uncorking your expertise. It is a truth universally acknowledged that you're pretty much always going to be outnumbered. There will be one of you, or there'll be one or two of you, and there'll be a million designers, a million engineers, product owners, product managers. So managing up, down, sideways, this is just, again, to emphasize no one else is looking at the words the way you all are, and making sure it's supported in the way that it needs to be. And you see things that other people don't. So as a solo practitioner or a small team, member of a small team, embrace the content strategy framework. Content strategy for the win. This is really, all I did was follow our basic kind of shared agreed ways of working in the world of content strategy. Sort of, as I mentioned, started on the far left there with content strategy. Did my first kind of models, got the defined principles, in work with the taxonomist on that, wrote the authoring guidelines with file naming conventions. So taking care of sort of the very big and the very small, but everyone sort of does, the content strategy framework has all of these things available to you to do it. So there's no other thing that you need to know, if you get what I mean. It just build on these and have faith that because these things work. So I'm just going back to my transformation timeline. You can probably hear my dogs now in the background. It's all happening at my house today. Like, of course it is when I have to be on a presentation. So this looks so neat and tidy and linear, and it kind of wasn't like that at all. So we had a sweet spot in June 2021 when we launched the US pages, and we had about 2 weeks where it was just done. Great, we were patting ourselves on the back. We were done. It was awesome. And then, of course, business as usual changes came in. The BAU team, who are still front-end engineers working React templates, didn't have any way to understand what they had to do in the CMS. So that started to pose challenges. And the end of 2021, as we were building we'd just done our migration plan for the 170 countries. Rebrand was going to be launched in Q1 or Q2 2022. So we had to ditch everything we did. And we were also migrating to an in-house CMS. We'd been external at this point. This was largely a technical architect and engineering headache. But one thing that came to the fore here was naming, because we'd named things in a clear, straightforward way when we started. We could easily migrate across as we were renaming to suit the rebrand. So again, the principles that I'd put in place for how things should be set up. So you do that because when things like this happen, which happen all the time, you're well set up to manage that. Then there was the old, PayPal's like a 25-year-old company, so with various bits of legacy tech that are expiring, presenting kind of headaches for our compliance department. So we had to kind of pronto move stuff off there into the CMS. And then another rebrand. So this because I knew I was coming back to Australia really at the start of 2024. I handed this down to my content modeler I'd hired, and she worked with the technical architect to come up with what is a much, much better system than the one I built. Far more robust, because far closer to the code. The work that I was doing and the work that we did at the end of 2020, 2021 was all about what the pages look like, and particularly when the rebrand came through, we was going, oh, the rebrand's so shiny and new, let's kind of model this, which was a fatal kind of mistake that is being corrected with the work that's started from this year, the architecture reset. And all of this, the number one thing, if I can leave with you, is that you need a really strong governance framework. Governance sets you free, and governance is forever. So there's always going to be a rebrand. There's always going to be something you don't know, but you just deal with it as you can based on the principles and the content strategy framework that you have. There you go.
Amazing. Thank you, Kate. Gee, I have so many questions, but I'd better give other people a chance to ask them too. So if you have a question, please feel free to either pop it in the chat or put your hand up and ask out loud. I'm just looking through the chat. There's a lot of comments about people feeling having felt the same things around, or experienced the same things around long convoluted timelines, tech people not understanding content needs or experience needs. Comment from Tony: single sourcing localization, headless CMS, and content source in code. Oh my. But there's a few questions coming up. So one from Alana, which is, I think, an interesting one. Where do you see the role of the business analyst heading with regard to content work? In some orgs, content takes on some business analysis. In others, business analysis is considered purely engineering. And Dan said, same in my last role, the BA wrote content for the product, and everyone else expected them to. This required quite a lot of relationship work to bring this over to the content team. So yeah, working with BAs, is that something that you...
Not in this one, but I've done that in previous roles. And I mean, I just think they bring a really good focus on articulating the business problem that needs to be solved. However, there needs to be then a handover to content strategy to say, what does that mean for the content? So I think you need the business insight, because otherwise, what are you doing? How do you know what to do? So that may come from a business analyst or some other part of the business, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Great. A question from Tony: what was the overall direction regarding redirecting old URLs to prevent broken links?
Carefully considered. That we took that incredibly seriously, because so at some point in that, I think 2022 or 2023, I audited the site and discovered, the incredible number of pages that were not being looked at all, So it was a combination. There's a whole redirect strategy. And because we were dealing with content in legacy tech stacks, and some in a CMS and some in other kind of random content systems, we had a very kind of carefully kind of planned, considered approach that just made sure that as we moved, we were getting people to the right thing, and we were making sure that redirects were viable, and they worked. I mean, because there was a big cleanup that engineering did to clean up old things. But once we had the CMS, and once, for example, I put the 404 page into the CMS, that sort of changed a lot of things as well.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Let us know if you have any follow-up there too. Yeah.
Basically, it was a big team sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my pet, well, one of the bees in my bonnet is that content people should be interested in URLs in
Mm,
general and the way
yeah.
they're structured, the way they're
Yeah.
written. Yeah. We
Yeah.
assume it's just like a technical thing, but actually
No.
it's part of the content. It's yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at least part of the.
I won most of those battles. Occasionally things would just come in from left field and we would have to just
Mm,
deal. So
mm. Yeah. Great. Okay, lots of questions and comments coming up. So Elle really loved how you showed the process is not linear.
mm.
McGee, a bit of back and forth about that final catch cry of governance will set you free. Governance is forever. McGee wants to make an inspiring meme. Anna wants to write a song about it. But also, jokes aside, McGee would like to hear more about it. Anything particular you'd like to hear more about there, McGee?
I think what I'm interested in, because I just like I can't agree more,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
why like the meme that I'm picturing has like a sunset with in the background, and then you like looking out to the distance, and then the phrase. And
Yeah.
I could just look at that when I feel sad. But I think also I'm interested in maybe some like specific
Yeah.
examples of how you saw those changes kind of be sustained. Because like I really
Yeah.
loved the way that you kind of illustrated the different iterations it took and the evolution
Yeah.
of it. But yeah, I'd love to see some kind of maybe.
Yeah. No, and thanks for asking, because it's a really good point that I should talk to. So when I started, I mentioned no one else really knew what we were doing or what was in store.
Mm,
I knew that they were going to have to change their workflows. I knew the resourcing will have to change. I wrote the job spec for the CMS author, I think in January 2021, and they didn't start until October 2022.
yeah,
Right.
right.
So it was
Yeah.
just that kind of thing. But I did, really kind of detailed, pretty Confluence pages called the new .com governance framework. Right. I did all the usual things. I've got the Managing Chaos book, and I was like, yeah, I'm just doing this. And I put headings and I wrote everything for it. And I published it and I walked away. And then
Mm,
like a million things kept happening, And we just were making it up not making it up, but I was continuing to document in random places. And then there was a compliance breach because something got
mm,
published in the CMS that it shouldn't have done,
mm,
because there'd been a lack of attention to user roles and access, and someone with
mm,
publishing access published content that wasn't meant to go live. Classic kind of content authoring user roles. And suddenly my governance docs were like, oh man, they're bad, right? This is
mm,
useless. And in
mm,
my head, I thought we were fine, but we were not. So
mm,
I was asked to turn those. No one else, I don't think anyone else read those. But my boss said, we need standard operating procedures for the site. And that
mm,
phrase made sense from PayPal's perspective, because they had standard operating procedures for other parts of PayPal. And so
mm,
that name aligned with how it could fit in the PayPal context.
mm,
And I just did a who, what, when, why, how,
mm,
which essentially was our governance framework. I just didn't call it that. And I
mm,
put everything there and tied up all the loose ends. So tidied up the user access. By then I'd done the how to be a CMS author, the
mm,
training, and I'd done the training guidelines, and I'd mandated training and recorded
mm,
it and that kind of thing. So it was a bit more robust to it. But so I think we were we successful? Yeah, we were, because suddenly we had something that actually people could read and understand in a way that
mm.
they couldn't in a governance doc.
Mm, mm. I think that's actually a really important point that you just pointed out as well, which is always a problem with governance, is that there's, and government is a classic for this, where there's thousands of pieces of
Yeah,
documentation, but they're not actually usable for people.
yeah,
There's nothing that
yeah,
helps them just really quickly grasp it.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did. I mean, for example, pricing. When we onboarded the pricing content, I mean that is a critical piece of content for us that has its own special everything. So they
Mm,
have their own section in the SOP because they need it. and other very special bits of content will have that as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. And Dan says, yes, she's done governance so many times and not called it governance because people seem scared by the word governance. Yeah. That can be another thing. So I think we're probably going to have to, we've got about 3 questions left. We might have to leave it at that. So no more questions, sorry, people. But I'll just go to the next one from Elle and with a follow-up from Aidan. Can you tell us more about the localization process? Did you in-house the languages or some outsourced? Aidan also noticed there seemed to be some UI pattern differences in different local contexts. So it wasn't just the content that changed, but in some cases, things like the number of buttons on a screen.
Yep.
So yeah, anything.
Yeah. So localization was, I mean, Pepper's always had a really big localization team who managed. So I mentioned that in countries would do their own sort of hire their own in-house people, but it all would end up with a central localization team. So they had translation memory. So we had a really strong translation memory database, and that was their bag. They did that. So really the key difference was, I think local countries still continued to use whoever they needed as their agency, but when they dealt with the central team, it was the bit that was of concern to us is just that pipe between the translation memory in their software and our CMS software that was publishing the content. So building that connector. So that's where the effort of the .com team. So that was not really me. That was more an engineering, technical architecture, localization architecture conversation. And I was a stakeholder in that just to advise on the CMS, how the CMS should function for that. So I made sure that the models that I set up, we had to make sure they were flagged for localization, or because if they weren't, they couldn't be consumed by the API. So that made. What's the second part of that question?
Oh, just the different number of buttons.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was often just, maybe product availability or, the US has 100% of everything that PayPal does, but no other country has that. Yeah. Everyone has like slightly different, maybe the same product, but manifest in a different way. Yeah. It might be paying 3 in one country and paying 4 in another. And that would be manifest in just, and also buttons were sometimes it'd be really, the way you contacted sales was through, like I contact sales through a button like that, or it may have been another way. Yeah. But from a modeling and architecture perspective, we managed that by just making sure that the models were flexible enough so I would align with the product owners on things like minimum and maximum number of buttons. So typically it was minimum 1. I don't think we ever had 3. It was like minimum 1, maximum 2, right? So, but it would be a non-mandatory field for those occasions when you don't have any, right?
Yeah. Terrific. Tony, we might skip your question and maybe come back to it quickly at the end if we've still got time. Just one from Thomas. How did you go about educating teams on how to use the CMS? So were you using written documentation, pre-recorded interviews, videos, workshops, a combo? Yeah.
All of the above.
Well, yeah.
So just because it was, to start with, I did all the authoring myself, and the product manager helped out a little bit. So I did all the authoring and in the process, and we got to a different workflow. New component, do a test build. I would do how do you author this in the CMS, and that would be our first cut of authoring guidelines. We'll publish those to a Confluence page, and we'd made sure that my authoring team made sure that they followed that and that it validated essentially that it was correct and made any adjustments. Then I would do regular training sessions, which are recorded, just to say, new component, here's the new thing, here's how it gets authored, and made that available in a suite of like training docs. So it was video backed up with Confluence docs. Oh, and something else that was really important was, as I was building the models, I was really particular about help text in the authoring interface, because there were lots of minimum 2, maximum 3, and because of the difference across countries, sometimes a component would only be used in one country, so you'd have to sort of communicate all of this. So I was really particular about the help text to make sure. So that was another, if you'd somehow skipped all the authoring training, between the help text and the mandatory and optional fields that I built in the CMS, you could publish successfully.
You could kind of work it out.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Kate. I'll take you off the hot seat now. But thanks so much for answering all those questions. I'm sure people have lots more, but maybe we'll have to have you back another time.
That's fine. And just hit me up on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have chats all the time.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks once again, Kate. That's been fantastic. So I am just going to take a few minutes to do some announcements. If you do have announcements yourself, as I said at the start, please pop them into the chat. We've already had, and I've just lost my chat because Zoom does that. Yeah, there's already been some announcements. So a couple from Elle, one about her in-person meetup in Sydney, which I can confirm is a fantastic meetup and a fantastic group of people. Also some courses she has coming up. Catherine at the College of Psychiatrists has a full-time content designer position in Melbourne, which is fantastic. So have a look at that if you're interested, or get in touch with Catherine. Christy says, is there anything in Melbourne? Funny enough, I'm just about to talk about something in Melbourne. And yes, anything else, just drop it into the chat. Just a few things from us. Just on behalf of one of our previous clients, if you are in Melbourne and you work in internal comms, so if you work on things like intranets or HR systems or employee help desks, employee blogs, I guess, anything like that, and you'd like to just share some knowledge with people who work in the same sort of field, Joe Tierney from ANZ is trying to start up a little networking group for people in that sort of space. So please get in touch with Joe either via email or you can connect with her on LinkedIn. It is Tierney, Teirney. I always make that mistake. EI, not IE. So that's good opportunity for a group starting up. We are going to have an in-person get together on our normal meetup day, which is the 28th of November. It is going to be in Melbourne, so apologies for those of you who aren't in Melbourne or Ocean Grove. Maybe you might want to make the trip, but or you might want to book a flight. You're very welcome. But yeah, we did want to do something in person because we haven't done it for a number of years, and we all happen to be together, so we thought it would be a good opportunity. So that'll be on the 28th of November at Mr. Wilkinson in Brunswick East, which is a great little bar, very casual, relaxed, accessible, and they have food there. So we would love to see some of you there. That will be advertised that will be up on meetup.com. We'd love to get some RSVPs just to get a sense of how many numbers we might get. So if you'd like to come, then yeah, if you can RSVP on Meetup, that would be great. Our first meetup for 2025. So being Australia, we take a bit of a break over Christmas and summer. So we're planning to be back around the end of February with a fabulous first speaker for 2025. We do have all our past talks from this year are now up on YouTube, our YouTube channel, and we'll be adding Kate's there too. And so yeah, check out us. We are Content Strategy and Design on YouTube. And finally, the training that we've run on behalf of Content Design London in Australia. We have dates for next year now for both of the training courses, the fundamentals course and Content Design in Action, which used to be called the advanced course. We also have a few tickets left for the advanced course that we're running in a few weeks, around the end of November. I think there's 3 tickets left last time I checked. So if you're wanting to do something before the end of the year, don't delay. But that's it for my announcements. Again, feel free to post anything in the chat that you'd like the group to know about. But we've come to the end of our formal time. So thanks once again to Kate, our wonderful speaker. Thanks to everyone for being here. Welcome to those who are here for the first time. We hope to see you either at our drinks in Melbourne, if you are in Melbourne, or at our first meetup next year. So stay tuned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Angus. Thanks, Kate.
Bye.
Bye.
So you're happy with that, Angus?
It was brilliant, Kate.
Oh, cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Sounds like the Booper people who were here were like, oh yeah, we've got a good one. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm going to have to run because I'm heading into my presentation.
Kate and I have a meeting in an hour's time, so I'm gonna let's wrap it up.
Yep.
And
Take
go and have
care,
lunch.
everyone.
But I'll see you soon. Okay.
So nice to see you though, Kate. And yeah, I'm going to make that meme for you.
Yeah, do it. I love it. Cool.
All right.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.